Okay, welcome to the Hockey News Anaheim Ducks show. My name is Patrick Present, one of the writers, reporters, editors of the hockeynews.com/Anaheim. I'm joined by my partner Derek Lee. Derek, how are we doing?
I'm doing all right. Just got back from the East Coast. A little tough couple of games there, but I still enjoyed myself. Nice to go back to the East Coast after I think like over a decade or something.
Yeah, unfortunately the games you saw weren't the most spectacular from a Ducks perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think my friend that I stayed with, he kind of mentioned it. He was like, "Yeah, you came all the way out here, and then they didn't even bother to score a single goal." And I was just like, "Oh, that's how it goes sometimes."
Yep. Speaking of the road trip, the Ducks were almost to the 500 mark when they had embarked on the road trip. They're 1-3-1 since then, having played some true stinkers, including two blowout losses, two shutouts. They got an overtime loss last night against the Tampa Bay Lightning, and they defeated the Carolina Hurricanes in overtime. What are your takeaways from the 5 games of the 6 game road trip so far?
Well, the first one was interesting just because, they went into St. Louis, they got to honor Cam Fowler for 1,000 games. I think that really kind of even that just before the game that already kind of made everything feel weird. And you could kind of tell in their play. I mean, they lost 6-2. So it was a really tough game. And you kind of expected them to bounce back. It was going to be another emotional game in Philadelphia. Cutter Gauthier, with all the response that he's received from the Philadelphia fans. And they kind of just laid an egg. Like that might have been perhaps their worst performance of the season. I would say like they weren't great defensively. They generated a couple of things offensively, but it was just not consistent. And for most of the game, it just felt like they were just trying to out hit the other team, and that usually doesn't bode well when, especially when you're not a super physical team like the Ducks are. Carolina, I thought was a better effort, especially on a back to back, considering like you just gotten blown out the game before. So a couple of things, good things to take away from that. And then the DC game was just another kind of duck. They didn't really generate anything offensively. It was just a matter of whether Alex Ovechkin was going to score again or not. I felt like in that game. And then last night, there's a little bit more to take away, a little bit more encouraging things. I think you'd like to see them generate offense better in terms of kind of how those goals were created. They got 2 goals off of wonky redirects. So maybe there's some good things to take away from that, but I think you'd like to see the offensive generation come a little bit more naturally.
I think, yeah, that's the big thing. That's the big takeaway, I think, is how they're generating, and they're just it's been frustrating to say the least, especially, the blowout losses and the, not scoring more than 2 goals for most of the games. And it just seems that the middle of the ice is the priority, and it always has been. And I understand that that is where a lot of goals are scored and generated. And but it's like I don't necessarily think that the way to do it is the way they're being coached or taught to, meaning just flood the middle with bodies and pucks and hope for bounces. And we've talked to Cronin many times about this, and like that's a big priority of theirs. And I don't know, just it just seems like a spray and pray kind of mentality. But the most apparent kind of juxtaposition, I think, was the Washington game, because that's a team that arguably the Ducks have more skill than up and down the lineup on the back end and forward wise. And the way that Washington generates offense is really fun to watch, but also really effective in that they don't give up ice. They don't disregard the middle of the ice, but there's constant movement along the perimeter and at the top of the zone, along the walls and whatnot, to stretch out the Ducks' defensive structure, and it really opens those middle lanes. So when there are shots or passes taken, players can dart in and out of that middle of the ice, and that's how they generate their goals. And it's been effective so far, obviously, as they're at the top of the league. So I think that was the biggest kind of takeaway for me, was that game specifically. And then last night's performance we saw against Tampa was a better defensive performance, I thought. The penalty kill obviously still needs some work, and special teams altogether. But there were some promising signs as far as in the defensive zone, they were killing plays a little earlier and not letting Tampa get set up as much on the cycle. So then they kind of generated some rush opportunities, which, in my opinion, is the way that the Ducks would benefit from trying to prioritize those aspects.
Yeah, I think Guy Bear made a great point on the broadcast last night where he said that, Tampa doesn't want to defend. They kind of want to run and gun a little bit. And the Ducks took advantage of that too in that game against the Oilers a couple weeks ago where they were manufacturing chances, maybe perhaps at the expense of not being as defensively sound. But when you're playing against a team where their best defense is their offense and just keeping the puck out of their zone period, then maybe sometimes you take a little bit of a risk and you try to get the puck moving up out of your zone and into their zone. So at least you're not defending as much. Maybe it's you cost yourself a little bit of defensive structure, but you're trying to create more chances and trying to catch them out as opposed to just making sure that everything's okay on the defensive end.
Yeah, I'm not even sure how much it's like sacrificing defense per se. I mean, yes, you're taking some chances, jumping some lanes, as what we saw in those two games specifically, the Tampa one and then the first Edmonton one. The only two games in the last recent memory where they've outplayed their opponent for stretches. But I think they've made some considerable strides in their defensive structure, in my opinion, where they are very responsible, almost to a fault, to where they're allowing a lot of offensive zone time for the other team just because they are so diligent and not wanting to give up the middle of the ice and not wanting to give up those seams and position that has been plaguing them for the last 5, 6 years. But in doing that, they're not generating the offense that they need. But in last night and against Edmonton, like I mentioned, yeah, they were jumping those lanes and you know, but I feel like they do that because they trust their teammates and they trust the players that they're on the ice with to cover for them and to not blow their own assignments. So it's a give and take, but I think at this point they're they should be so committed and so comfortable with their system that they can kind of take those chances.
Yep. And then really quick, just because you mentioned, they focus so much on protecting the middle of the ice, but in doing that, we've seen just a lot of like the three-man weaves and kind of things like that by the opposition where they're getting on the perimeter and they're just weaving and weaving, going around in circles, and it just tires out the man-on-man system so much. So I think you touched on that really well in one of your recent articles. Is just sometimes they're focusing so much on the middle that everything else is just not as big of a focus, and it kind of ends up tearing them down a little bit.
Yeah, it just tires them out so where they can't provide this rush offense or offense in general. And eventually breakdowns are going to happen if they're in the zone for too long. Okay, let's move on to another factor that's been kind of present for the last month and a half now, which is a defensive logjam. Um, one of the younger defensemen, Drew Helleson, Pavel Mintyukov, Olen Zellweger, have been sitting since the Jacob Trouba acquisition on December 6th. And the trading of Cam Fowler made it so that two of those guys don't have to sit, but one still does. The odd man out to this point seems to be like Brian Dumoulin as far as projecting into the future, just because he is on an expiring deal, a very team friendly deal, just $3.1 million, I believe. And I think he has a 10-team no trade. Um, where do you kind of see this playing out? And is it kind of a situation where it's the sooner the better?
Well, right now we're a little bit under 2 months away. January 17th, the trade deadline is March 7th, I believe. So there's still a little bit of time to get things done, but it just depends on what kind of deal that Pat Verbeek is looking for and whether he sees it kind of as we need to move him immediately, and it doesn't matter what the return is, or maybe how desperate teams get in looking for defensive depth. Brian Dumoulin's a two-time Cup winner. He's been in the playoffs so many times. He played with some of the best players in the league, and Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin, and he was really solid alongside Chris Letang on those Stanley Cup winning teams. So I think his pedigree speaks for itself in terms of what teams can be looking for when they get a guy like Dumoulin. I think he's been really impactful for the team this year. He's played his offside. He can play the left and the right. He's a great penalty kill guy. He's great at avoiding the forecheck. There's not really a lot you can say bad about Brian Dumoulin. He's just a really solid, consummate professional. But the issue, like you said, is that his spot or him being in the lineup takes away playing time from one of the young guys. And for the most part, it's been Olin Zellweger. I think he's only played like three of the last 10 games or something insane like that. But yeah, you can't have a guy like that sitting in the press box for every other game. And I think it doesn't make sense to have him in the minors either because he spent most of last season in the AHL. So I think, yeah, the sooner the better for Dumoulin. I don't know what the package can look like. I'm not that type of guy that knows exactly where his value stands, but you get him out of the lineup, then you can get Zellweger in, excuse me, and you have Minchikov and you have Hallison. I think, especially because it seems like the Ducks are really just so married to that idea of having left-right pairings. It's allowed Drew Hallison to kind of gain that advantage, whether or not he's deserving of having that much playing time. Verbeek has spoken a little bit about like the competition, the internal competition, and oh, this is good because we have so many young guys that they can compete for playing time. But it feels like Olin Zellweger is like he'll come in the lineup, he'll have an okay game, and then he comes out, and there's not really a reason why he had to come out. So I think if Dumoulin gets traded, then you can have all three of those guys in the lineup, and then you kind of move forward with that. And then next season, when you have somebody like Tristan Luneau ready to come up, maybe then you can kind of create that again, but with all the young guys instead.
Yeah, I love Brian Dumoulin and what he's brought to the team. And when he is paired with a younger player, that player has a really insulated environment to so that potentially they can kind of explore their game and take a chance or kind of develop on both sides of the puck. And he's a great communicator as we know. Um, I just it's so tough and you want all the young guys to play. But I just know that the second they trade him, it's going to be like there's going to be an injury, and it's like, oh, cool. Now we have I don't know, is Luno ready to come up or whatever? But that's not really an issue right now, and not one they should be thinking about. It should be the priority should be to play all the younger players, and honestly, I don't think before the season started and either of us expected Hellison to make such an impact so immediately, and I think it kind of threw a whole wrench in everything and on the whole or on the surface that's a good problem to have, but right now we're seeing the effects of it as far as a long-term process. So yeah, unfortunately for Dumoulin, the sooner the better, and I know that he brings a lot defensively and he is so detailed and his the way he defends is so textbook. But at the same time, the Ducks are still one of the worst defensive 5-on-5 teams, if not the worst, and they have one of the worst penalty kills. So it's like, I don't know how much of an impact ridding yourself of Dumoulin will have. I mean, oh, they're going to give up more chances than they already are, I guess. But it's still like a very porous defensive scheme right now, or at least the numbers say so. Do you have anything else on Dumoulin?
No, I mean that was a great point. It's like if your team is still bad defensively, like as good as he is, then I mean it's kind of a wash.
Right. I mean, he'd be perfect for a playoff team, honestly, because obviously he's done it before, and he just provides that stable presence and a penalty killing benefit for a team who needs it and who can, who already has a good structure in place. So, yeah, I think it's time, unfortunately, for him and for us, because I just like talking to him because he talks like a coach. But okay, there's some good news on the horizon. About a week from now. Uh, Trevor Zegras got injured on December 4th, I believe. He underwent surgery for his torn meniscus on December 12th. They gave him a timeline of 6 weeks at the time. He's been skating since December 31st, but that 6 week time period places his return around when the Ducks will host Pittsburgh at Honda Center. And his return just is a will be a welcome one to both the penalty kill and 5-on-5 and kind of balance out the lineup, hopefully. What are you expecting upon Zegras' return, and when do you think we'll see him?
Yeah, I think, well, I mean, 6 weeks exactly will be when they play Pittsburgh next week. So I think maybe there might be a good chance that he's back by then, especially because he's been skating for about half a month. So Like you mentioned, the 5-on-5 and then the power play will be really like an added bonus just because of how creative he is and just the ability to generate offense. Like they have Leo Carlson, they have Mason McTavish, Troy Terry, Cutter Gauthier, but just having another guy like that in your lineup, especially that can kind of see the ice as well as he does, he makes like just these unique plays that you don't normally see from guys on the team. And then just having another forward that's capable of doing that, you make the lineup stronger. It's been a little bit of kind of like a true top six and a bottom six. So if you have Zegers back, it kind of bridges the gap between having like a solid top nine.
I would agree. Yeah, and just I like Isaac Lundestrom and the way he plays, but I think he's more suited for a fourth line role at this point. You can kind of say the same for Robbie Fabry and the energy he brings. You kind of see the pitfalls sometimes when he needs to make a skill play and just can't. So, and then obviously the power play is just atrocious right now, and it has been all season or in recent memory, years going back years now. And it, I just what he opens up as far as line combinations and the attention he draws on the ice and just the vision that he has for a team that is so starved for offense and is so hell bent on just funneling pucks to the front. It might be nice to have a perimeter player a little bit who can kind of work that pucks high to low by skating, get the puck on his stick as much as possible and see what he can create. As I just hope that's how he'll be utilized. I mean, we saw flashes of it before he was injured. I think it was something like he scored 7 points in the 8 games prior to going down. So, he was starting to put it together and really become that complete 200-foot player that has been asked of him. And, props to him. He's really, like we've said it before, but, he was criticized early in his career for ignoring the defensive side of the puck, and he kind of admitted that himself. And he's really worked to kind of round out that aspect of his game. And now it's time to start producing and translating that to the offensive side as well. And, with as much young talent as they have on the roster, I think Zegras can be a big piece of what they're trying to do going forward.
Mm.
Okay, moving on. I wanted to kind of discuss some of the play um, on the blue line, and specifically Radko Gudas. This is a guy who is his usage is higher than it's ever been in his entire career. He's, killing a ton of penalties. He's consistently averaging more than 20 minutes a night. He's getting some tough matchups, tougher than he's gotten, I think, to this point in his career, certainly since, joining the Ducks, I guess. But what have you made of his play lately?
Oh, well, like Radko Gudas, the first thing I think a lot of people think of when they think of Radko Gudas is his physicality, the big hip checks, the booming hits, the booming slap shot even. But I think this year it feels, I don't know if it's like a message from the coaching staff or whatnot, but it feels like he's really gone out of his way to be a lot more physical than he needs to be necessarily. He'll go out of his way to make a big hit or a hip check, and it kind of pulls everyone else out of position. And last night was just a prime example of this. Like his lack of foot speed, it was quite evident, and just going out of your way, going out of position to make a hit and pulling everyone else out of position. He took, I think it was maybe two penalties because of him putting himself out of position. There was another one where he got burned, and Jackson Lacombe had to take a penalty because of that. The goal in the Philadelphia game where Ryan Paling just speeds down the wing and absolutely just beats him just off of foot speed alone. Like it's really weird just because of how good Gudas was last season with Jackson Lacombe and with Urho Vakanainen. And they were like both, whether he was with Lacombe or Vakanainen, they were really solid defensively. And this year it's just kind of been like a 180 for him. And I don't know how much of that has been because he's the captain now, even if he doesn't admit that publicly, that can cause a lot of expectations and a lot of pressure to weigh on yourself just because that's such a big role to have as the team leader. And then some of that is just, I mean, that's just kind of just due to aging, which is unfortunate because he was really good last season. But a lot of that has changed in ways this season. I think The one last thing too for me, before I give it to you is just the way that he kind of just shoots everything is, I think, a bit of an issue. I mean, it's great that he wants to get pucks on net, but I think he could maybe learn a little bit from Jacob Trouba, where every shot at the net is intentional and it's not just let me shoot it on net and hope that something happens. Right? This is not an NHL video game where you can kind of rely on RNG and stuff like that. So with how big and powerful his shot is, I think if he can utilize that more and make it a weapon as opposed to I'm just going to shoot it when even when there's no traffic in front or there's no threat at all, and it just turns the puck over. I think that can help him become more useful of a player.
Yeah, I think there was there was an example in the Washington game where he they worked a good cycle down low. They brought it up high to Lacombe. Lacombe moves it over to Gudas, and Gudas has so much time and space. He has, I think, like from the blue line all the way to like the face-off dot in the offensive zone. He has that entire space, no traffic going to the front. So we could have just, skated the puck down in the zone a little bit, maybe gotten a shot off, maybe even looked to dish, and he just rips a shot from the point. It goes like 5 feet wide, and the Capitals defender picks it up and just goes the other way like it was a breakout pass. And yeah, that kind of stuff gets a little frustrating. And I think, yeah, learning from Truba in that aspect, and I think learning from Truba and the way he defends, because as frustrating as it is to see Truba play hockey sometimes in the sense of how not textbook he is defensively, like his gap control is just awful. But it's kind of by design because he knows that he's not the fleetest of foot, I think, in my opinion. That's what I'm seeing at least. And that he'll give a good cushion to a player coming, down his wing with speed, but he never lets that player get to the middle. He never gets posterized. He never gets dangled. Basically everything that Gudis has been doing the last 5 games that we've seen that you highlighted, and especially last night against Tampa and that point, Braden Point dangle. But so I think taking a page out of Trouba's book, maybe give a little bit more of a cushion and just don't surrender the middle. Like just trust yourself, trust your teammates to cover that open ice, and trust your back checkers to really make an impact, because the back checkers are there and they're working hard to get back into the play, and there's very few outnumbered attacks when both defensemen are back, if that makes sense. So, kind of rely more on them, give a little bit bigger of a cushion, really protect the middle, and I think he'll be better for it, and just simplify your game in other aspects. So, taking a page out of Jacob Trouba's book isn't something that I would have said a while ago, but just seeing how he handles the rush, I think that would benefit someone like Radko Gudas, and then just keep being punishing in front of the net. So, I think there's a way out of this, but I think he just kind of just do less. You know what I mean?
Yeah, kind of simplify his game a little bit, like to not to be cliche though.
But yeah, but simplify, but not just defensively. Because he's going out of position to make these hits, or he's gapping up properly, but he's just not matching speed properly, if that makes sense. So he's
Mm.
getting burned, and so yeah, simplify the defense and then kind of complicate the offense a little bit. Maybe don't hold on to the puck a little bit, draw a defender, and then move it down low. Or if there's a shooting lane in traffic, great, rip it. But if there's not, you need to kind of play a little bit less panicked with the puck on your stick. And then if you don't have anything else, I want to talk a little bit about how the Gulls are doing. And I know the record is poor, but something you can say for them that it's hard to say for the Ducks right now is they're the younger players on that team are progressing pretty well. Colangelo was just named an All-Star, and he's with the Ducks right now, but he's near a point per game. Nikita Nesterenko, I guess, is playing well enough to earn a call-up. He's been on the trip and playing a fourth-line role with the Ducks, but also Igor Sidorov, has something around 20 points in 30 games, and then Sasha Pasujov, after a stint in the ECHL, has really come back and torn it up. So I know we don't talk a lot of goals, and we don't watch a ton of goals hockey, but it's nice to see when I do watch. It's nice to see the progression from those younger players.
Yeah, I mean, Colangelo, even like last season when he came down from Northeast or Western Michigan, excuse me, he had like I think like 3 points in 4 games or something like that, and then he scores in his very first NHL game. So I think going to Western Michigan that really changed his game around, and he was able to kind of figured things out after a rough junior season with Northeastern. Igor Sidorov, he's out with a lower body injury right now, week to week, but he's been really solid in his first season as a pro. Um, the goal scoring ability has definitely been on display. I think like the just coming out of juniors, the defensive game needs a little work, but I think there's very few guys that come out of the CHL that are just sound defensively. So that's something that he can work on a little bit. But yeah, Sasha Passage um, has really been lighting it up for the goals. He's currently their leading point scorer right now with Colangelo called up and Sidorov on the injured list. And it was interesting because Sasha Passage didn't even begin the season with the goals. He started in the ECHL with Tulsa, and he played I think it was 12 games, 16 points in 12 games. And that's pretty good to do that in the ECHL. And so he got the call up to San Diego, and he's been really solid. He's got 21 points in 22 games. So um, it's just really interesting how he's kind of like flipped that switch, I guess you could say. He's still not the fleetest of feet when it comes to getting up and down the ice, but I think his game kind of reminds me of Trevor Zegras in a way where he's not the fastest, but he kind of knows how to like slow things down, and he knows what to do when the puck is on his stick. And he still is able to get into those spots where he can manufacture points, whether it's a goal or an assist. And he's had points in 11 of the last 12 games. He's on a 6 game point streak. And most of that has come alongside Jan Mysak, who's kind of more of a gritty forward. He's really great on the forecheck and getting pucks back and helping create time and space for somebody like Pashazov. And they'd been playing with Colangelo prior to his call up, and now they're playing with Carson Meyer, I think it is now, who's kind of a more like grittier two-way forward type of guy than Colangelo is maybe. But just the way that Pashazov and Mishak have been able to kind of generate things off the rush, off the cycle, what have you. I think it's been really great for Pashazov because I think there was a point maybe last season where it was kind of unclear what he was going to become and if he could really make that next step in his development.
Yeah, if sending him down was a message, then I guess message received. And you know, he's developing the pro fourth line habits with these players, but also utilizing the space that they create with their forecheck and kind of filling lanes properly and stuff like that. So it's really nice to see from him as well. And I wanted to highlight also, I know the point totals have been pretty poor for guys like Myadovic and Gaucher, but in the same way that Pasujov and Sidorov need to expand on their defensive game, maybe the AHL is an opportunity for those kind of guys, the Myadovics and Gauchers, to expand their offensive game a little bit. And, just watching them play, those two, they're so, like, as a coach, you understand why they're so liked, and as a scout, I guess, because they are super involved. They give 100% effort on every play. They're forechecking and disruptive and back checking, and they skate really well. And, they just kind of need to slow down a little bit, maybe take some of the habits that you've seen from guys like Pasujov and Sidorov. So I think watching their development, I still don't, I still don't love those picks when they were made, and I don't love them now. But at the same time, I see what the intention was, and I can see how there's a path forward and what there can be as pros. So I'm not as down on them, as I was maybe, at the start of the season. So that's a positive outlook in my opinion.
Yeah, and then before he got hurt, I think Sidorov was playing with Gaucher and Jed Caulfield, and Jed Caulfield's a big guy, like a power forward kind of guy. So you got Gaucher and Caulfield kind of working things on the forecheck, and then opening up that for Sidorov, who's a pretty solid forecheck, I would say, in his own right. He maybe the defensive work is a little bit lacking, but he's really great at trying to get pucks back, and he's got a little bit of strength, I think, in holding onto that puck. So that line has worked out really well. So I think whenever he's back, if they can kind of get those two lines going, especially with guys like Nestorenko and Colangelo up with the Ducks now, then that can kind of help solidify things for the goals.
Yeah, totally. And then unless you have anything else, I want to move on a little bit to what we saw against the Tampa Bay Lightning when Greg Cronin kind of shuffled the lines a little bit more. We've seen him try to find some different combinations that work outside of, he's kind of had his top line of Terry, Stroman, Vitrano, but after that he's kind of played around. And last night we saw McTavish on Carlson's wing with was it Alex Killorn, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, and I thought especially the two of them, McTavish and Carlson, their interplay was a breath of fresh air. McTavish was able to put his forechecking on display, playing in a wing position, and also, he was able to cover for Carlson if Carlson found his way too far up ice. McTavish, it performed well as the center and in coverage as well, and I liked what I saw from the two of them and Carlson utilizing the space that McTavish created along the wall with his battle winning ability. So I thought that was a nice combination and something that would be interesting to explore going forward.
Yeah, I think some of the things that you kind of saw with Carlson and McTavish is some of the stuff that McTavish and Cutter Gauthier have been doing lately when they were on the line together. Especially just having someone like Alex Killorn, who wins a lot of board battles, and he's really great at getting the puck to the guys that are so-called more skilled, right? And like he always talks about that as, oh, I want to get the puck to Leo or whoever I'm
Mhm.
playing with, if it's Carlson or Zegras, and just letting them do the thing. And so then you have McTavish and Carlson on the same line, and now they're able to kind of work well off each other. I mean, that pass from McTavish to Carlson for his goal last night was just incredible work. They didn't have the puck, they got it back behind the net, and just the release that Leo had on that is, I feel like, is something he hasn't really utilized a lot so far in his career.
And I wanted to also point out that that line, John Cooper matched up the Kucherov Gensel point line against Carlson and McTavish, and Carlson and McTavish came away the better for it. So I thought that was a little interesting wrinkle and something that maybe Cronin can explore when they return to Anaheim and he has the matchup, the say in the matchup because he's been using the Terry line as a matchup line. But I think it'd be interesting to explore that because they didn't allow easy entry because Carlson is such a pest on the back check, and then McTavish just doesn't give up on plays, and Killorn is the one who is more prototypically defensively responsible. So I thought the interplay between those three defensively was interesting, and then they just turned it right back up ice, especially with Carlson's speed and McTavish's ability to draw defenders. So I think that might be something a little interesting to explore. And then, and then when Zegras comes back, I guess I don't know. What would you do as far as line combinations there?
I mean, it's tough, right? Because they've seen things that have worked, and then they kind of go away from it, and then somebody gets hurt or something happens, and then you have to kind of flip things around. Um, I think I would like to see them try the Cutter Gauthier, Trevor Zegras, Alex Killorn line again, because that line was just so great. Like just with the eye test and analytically, like they didn't generate the most chances, but any chances they did get, they were pretty good at putting away. So if you can get those guys together, maybe you put Sam Colangelo on Leo Carlson's wing and you have McTavish, Carlson, Colangelo, or maybe you put Colangelo back with Strome and Vitrano because that looked pretty good for the couple of games that they were together. I mean, one of them was against Philadelphia, so you can't really say much, but they still had a couple good looks. And then maybe you put Troy Terry with McTavish and Carlson. I feel like that is something that could really get going. You have those three guys on the line together, and it's just great. And then maybe the third and fourth line, depending on what you want to call those lines, you just have a combination of Isaac Lundstrom, Jansen Harkins, Robbie Fabry, Brett Leeson. Those are all guys that can do a lot of good work on the forecheck. They create a lot of energy. They kill penalties. So you can have a solid top nine, and then your fourth line is just the absolute like chaos, like energy creator. I think that's a step in the right direction for the Ducks.
I'm sold. Yeah, I like that idea a lot. So that'll be interesting to see. I just was curious. Just we've seen them try so many things, and when Zegras returns, it's going to be even more. So, and then we have this is the benefit of having so many guys who can play center. Because traditionally wing's the easiest position to play. So, and then with the way that they play, so many times you'll see Frank Vetrano as the low man in coverage just because he was the first back checker back and stuff like that. So when you have two centers on a line, either one of those guys can play low in coverage. So I like that. I like those ideas a lot. And we're kind of running out of time, so unless you have anything else, we might be done.
Oh yeah, we covered everything, so that was great.
All right. Catch us next time. But my name is Patrick Present for the Hockey News, and my partner Derek Lee. We'll be covering the Ducks when they return from their road trip, and hopefully, hopefully this season. I know it kind of feels like it's slipping away a little bit with this, but this road trip and this stretch. But maybe a return of number 11 can get a couple more wins on the board, and they can eat closer to 500. And before I let you go, do you have an updated prediction on where you think the Ducks will end up in the standings as far as how many points they're going to
Oh, I mean, I don't even have like the
get?
standings pulled up. I think at the beginning of the season, I thought maybe like 80 was achievable. Maybe we'll knock like 10 off of that right now. 70, I think
Yeah.
maybe. But yeah, I mean, just some of the stretches have been great. Some of them have been not so great. So hopefully they can get a couple more great stretches. I think. Well, I mean, the trade deadline's pretty far, but once they get to that point, I think we'll have a pretty good idea of where they'll end up finishing this season.
Yeah, I think around 75 was a projected success as long as again the younger players can actually start producing and progressing here. So anyway, sorry to delay, but all right. I'm Patrick President with the Hockey News for Derek Lee. We will see you next time. Thanks for watching. Thanks for reading.